Everybody, my name is Mr. Jacks. I'm one of the assistant head teachers here at Coombe, and the primary aim of this video is to share with parents and carers some of the work that Year 11 students have been doing around revision and study skills in school this year. There are lots of links to videos and resources as we go through this presentation for you to delve into in your own time. And students may wish to come back to this as well, because whilst they've had this material shared with them, as they get closer to the exams, they might want to come back and remind themselves of some of the revision techniques and ideas that we've been talking about. To start with, you might think at any point in time that you're listening or watching this video, why are we talking about this now? Exams are a long, long way away. Well, the very reason that we're talking about it now is because what we know is that actually the science and the research around how the brain works tells us that we need to be preparing early, and that revision being left to the last minute is really quite a bad idea. So what we've covered with students, if you've got a child in Year 11, then they will have been having a look at, across 4 sessions, what revision is, what effective revision is. They will have been looking at some different techniques. They'll have been thinking about what makes a good revision environment. All of these things just to try and help them get a little bit of a head start on their revision. And hopefully the main thing is for them to have understood that leaving their revision to the last minute and just reading over their notes the night before the exam, like many of us may have done when we did our exams back in the day, is really a very poor idea. And we wanted to equip them with that knowledge so that they could make the right decision and start their revision earlier and in a much more effective way. So one of the things that we've talked with all students about is what makes effective and also not particularly effective revision. When we ask students, and when you talk to people that have done exams in the past, what sort of revision they use or they'd recommend, they'll tend to come up with things like just rereading over their notes, reading through things and highlighting, completing past papers, doing things at the last minute and hoping it'll stick in there for the exam that's happening tomorrow. What we know from the research that has gone on, though, is that actually there are far higher impact revision techniques that can be utilised by students. Those being around what we call retrieval practice, spaced practice, dual coding, and things like elaboration, which I'm going to talk about a bit later on in this presentation. So what we've been trying to get the students to think about is that actually effective revision is probably a little bit more is different, and actually probably a little bit more difficult and requires a bit more planning and forethought than what they might consider to be the traditional revision techniques. Now that question, why are we talking about revision now? The students were probably asking that in September and thinking, well, the exams are sort of 7-8 months away. Why are we talking about this now? So the first thing we wanted to introduce to the students was this idea of something called the forgetting curve. I'm not going to go and explain it in great detail now, but there is a link below where you found this video, video number 1, which explains what the forgetting curve is. And it really answers that question of why are we talking about revision now? Well, it's because we know that the human brain needs to be revisiting things regularly over quite a long period of time if it's going to actually get information into its long-term memory, which obviously will be most useful when it comes to the exams. So if you want to pause this video now and have a look at video number 1, all about the forgetting curve, that will give you a greater understanding of what we've been talking to the students about. Something else which we talked to the students about is about planning to be successful. Really, we've been hammering the idea that they have to make sure that they know what the topics and skills are that they're going to need within each of their subjects for their exams. So we've been asking them the question, do you know where to find this information? Do you have your curriculum intent organisers? Do you have your knowledge checklist from your teachers? And if you don't, you've got to access those. And as parents and carers, something that you can really support with at home is asking that same question of your children, asking them to explain to you, what is going to come up in the history exam? What are the things that you need to know? Where is your checklist for the things that could possibly come up in the English or the maths paper? Can they show that to you? Can they walk you through that? And if they can't, then there's a possibility that they need to talk to their teacher, or that you need to get in touch and ask where they can find that material. It will have been shared with all students, it will be readily available, but they do need to have that at hand, because if they don't have that, then it's possible that they're actually going to be planning what to revise ineffectively. What we've also asked students is whether they're in a position to start thinking about building a schedule and a timetable for revision, because what we do know is that the research shows us that students who plan early and do little and often rather than leaving it all to the last minute are likely to be more successful, because they'll have had a chance to revisit material in a structured way, which will have likely got it into their long-term memory, which will mean that when it comes to the exams, they're able to more readily access that knowledge and those skills that they need. Something that's a really good video to add a little bit of understanding to the previous video about the forgetting curve is this idea of spaced learning, which again answers that question, why are we talking about this now? We're really trying to get students to think about revising and thinking about planning their revision as early as possible rather than leaving it to the last minute, as I keep saying. So I'd recommend pausing now and having a look at the video number 2 about spaced learning. Now, something else that we've been sharing with students is this idea of having a revision timetable, so that you can plan and consciously plan to revisit different elements of different subjects in a way that makes sure that you cover all the things you need to cover. Simply here on the screen, I've just Googled revision timetable template, and we haven't said to students this is the one you must use, because all students are different and they'll find a different way. But what we do know is that there are hundreds of different revision timetable creators out there, and there's even things like this, online apps and what have you, that can help students to plan their revision. If there's one thing that I can say from my experience as a teacher, it's that as adults we are far better at organising and planning our time than young people are. So as a parent and carer, something that is absolutely brilliant that you can do, which will have a real impact, is to sit down and help your child plan out their schedule and the time that they're going to spend revising. We know that children are not expert organisers of time, and we know that as we build up to exams, young people can start to feel a bit anxious and worried. So actually just sitting down and taking sometimes actually a couple of hours to really look at the next few months ahead and think about what days of the week revision is going to happen, how long is it going to happen for, what evenings is there, not a club or activity happening, so they can actually devote some revision time. That's a really helpful thing that we would encourage all parents and carers to do, so that you can all be in it together, so that you as parents and carers can know exactly when the revision is happening and should be happening, and you can help to provide the conditions of quiet for that study that's happening at home, and so on and so forth. We also talk to students, and this I think is really useful for parents to know, about what else is out there in terms of revision, because it's not just about rereading your notes, although obviously that is useful, and students have got their exercise books with practice exam questions in them, and they've been given loads of brilliant resources throughout the time during their GCSE courses. You've also got revision guides that you can buy online. You have got past papers that can be accessed online. You've also got nowadays a number of teachers who are running YouTube accounts where they are covering content but also exam technique. Now, I'm not in a position to recommend different YouTube accounts across all the subjects, but if you talk to your teachers, or your child talks to their teachers, they'll be able to recommend quite useful accounts where teachers are covering the content in quite an interesting and informative way. You've got things like online platforms such as Seneca, which are testing students and are revisiting their material in a different way. You can have apps on your phone, etc. So it doesn't all just have to be reading and writing. If you go to BBC Bitesize, there is lots and lots of material for revision across all subjects there, and you have podcasts via BBC Sounds, etc. Again, teachers might be able to recommend specific ones for each subject. It's just an example there on the screen of what that will look like when you get into the BBC Bitesize website. So we're just saying to students, it doesn't have to be just sitting and reading over your notes and highlighting, because we know that's not very effective. What we know is more effective is to try and mix up your revision, to try and give some variety. So there's lots out there that can help you. One of the links from the section of the school website which you probably found this video on, where the revision material is kept, is a link to a document with the title 9 Study Skills, which has been produced by a group called the Teacher Toolkit, and they have a very useful website if you wanted to visit that. It is material aimed at teachers, but actually I think the way that it's produced and written is really useful for parents and carers to have a look at as well. So there are 9 study skills covered with examples in that document. The ones that we've talked to students about are summarisation and dual coding. I won't go into too much detail on those now because they're kind of covered within that document and in some of the videos that come later. But I would really recommend having a look at that document with just some really good examples of techniques that if your child is saying, I don't know how to revise, I don't know what to do, you could say, okay, why don't we have a go at one of these techniques, look at it together, talk about how it might work. They're really well explained in that document there. One really effective, I think, method for students learning and remembering knowledge and facts, and we know that that is a demand for students. They've got a number of subjects and there's a lot of stuff for them to remember. But one of those techniques that I think is brilliant for that is something called the Lightner system. Now the Lightner system, the image on the screen kind of sums up how it works. It's about using flashcards where students test themselves in a spaced way on different days of the week. It's really quite difficult to explain without being able to visually demonstrate for you. So rather than try and do that, there are 2 links, video number 3 and video number 4, which explain what the Lightner system is. I really think this is one worth parents and carers having a look at. All of our Year 11 students have been shown this method, but they will need your help probably in organising the materials to help them create this system, which will enable them to check their understanding and build their knowledge over time. So do have a look at video 3 and 4 about the Lightner system, please. Something else that we've talked to students about is effective mind mapping, and we've got on the screen here examples of what people probably think are quite effective mind maps. They've chucked a load of stuff down on paper and they know loads of stuff because there's loads of things written down. But actually what we've been talking to students about is the research that has gone into what makes actually a better mind map than that, which end up looking a little bit like what you can see on the screen now, where you have slightly less information supported with images, what we call dual coding. And actually, bizarrely, believe it or not, there is actually a lot of research that has gone into how to make an effective mind map. And one of the main thinkers behind mind mapping is a guy called Tony Buzan. He made a lot of videos back in the day, made a career out of mind maps, and the link to video number 5 will talk a little bit about what makes an effective mind map. So again, you can talk with your child at home when they're doing some revision about how to structure their mind maps, but also you can look at the work they've done and maybe make some suggestions on how they could simplify or use dual coding. But yeah, I'd recommend having a look at video number 5, all about effective mind mapping. The final video link which you will find in our website section is video number 6, which is a link to coverage on the topic of what is known as Cornell notes. Again, this is something we've shared with students. Often when we're talking to students about making notes, doing their revision, what we're talking about is sort of filtering that information down from often where they've done sort of a couple of pages of work in a lesson, and it's unlikely they're going to remember all of that. So what we're trying to equip them with is tools for filtering that information down, simplifying it, making it a little bit easier to remember and then revise from in the future. Just like with the Lightner method, where they're making those flashcards and then revising from in the future, the Cornell note method is a way of filtering information down to make it more memorable and then giving them something to revise from in the future. Again, the video link that is here explains it a little bit better, but you can see on the screen the structure of what a Cornell note page might look like. And what students end up left with is questions on the left-hand side, which link to the information, and the notes on the right-hand side and the summary at the bottom. So if they've created a bank of Cornell notes, and I know some students will actually create whole folders of these things, what they can then do is use the kind of cover technique, sticking their hands over the notes and the summary and revising from the questions. Or even as parents and carers, you can have the Cornell notebook in your hand with the notes and the summary in front of you and use the questions that the student has designed to quiz them and get them to try and talk about their ideas. Because we know that just reading, writing, highlighting is not always going to be something that gets things into students' long-term memory, but actually having to explain it to you as probably a non-expert in a subject is something that's really, really helpful. So you having these notes at hand will enable you to question and get your child to explain their understanding to you. That could be really, really effective. So do have a look at the Cornell Notes video. And just to finish up, hopefully some of those links have been of use to you, and even if there's one technique there that you can try and work on together at home, that's absolutely brilliant. We have talked to students about study space and what makes an effective study space, and we have talked to them about the fact that having their mobile phone on or at hand or nearby is a bad idea. And again, as parents and carers, your help in taking that away, putting it in a safe place or providing a safe place for it can be really effective to give your child that clear headspace to focus on their revision. We talked about them having a desk. It's not always possible. It's really difficult, I know, to find space in bedrooms or homes that have the desk space, but if you can provide that desk space, that kind of special place where they go to do their revision and they keep the materials in a nice organised way, that is really, really effective in providing a consistent study space. Having quiet conditions where possible. Again, it's not always possible. But we talked earlier about having a timetable and parents and carers knowing when the children are revising and therefore being able to support with making sure that there is a quiet environment around them. And working together on those plans. Things like saying, you know, you're going to go and work in your bedroom for half an hour, I'll bring you a drink of water after half an hour, bring you some food after this amount of time, but I'm just going to let you get on with it. I'm going to try and provide no distractions. And again, having that timetable which has been planned together will probably enable you to do that more effectively than just if your child comes home and suddenly announces that they're not coming down for tea tonight because they're going to go and do some revision. That can be tricky. So I really recommend working on those plans together as a team. So in summary, and this is kind of the key message I want to get across, just by talking to your child about their plans, the way they're revising, doing their flashcards with them, testing them on their flashcards, using those Cornell notes to ask them questions, doing the Lightner method with them, just understanding a little bit more from the first couple of videos about how the brain works and how the forgetting curve works is really helpful. You do not have to be a subject expert to help your child to revise. In many ways it can actually be beneficial that you're not a subject expert and your child can talk to you and can teach you about the things they've been learning. But knowing a little bit about these techniques can be really helpful. I've talked already about planning together, building a schedule, helping them with that. We know that children struggle with their organisation, their forward thinking, their planning. We've given them the science and the research behind why they should do this. We've just told parents and carers about it in this video, but working on that and the plan that works for you at home is going to be really beneficial. Provision of a study space is really crucial. And what I would say is if you're really struggling, if your child is struggling for materials, they really need something to help them to revise, but there's a financial difficulty at home, please get in touch with the year team leader and we can do what we can to support with this, because we want all of the children to have access to a study space and the right materials. And if that can't happen at home, then we can try and provide that for them in school. I talked about having the quiet, no distractions, no mobile phones for when they're doing their revision, and that does require a bit of forward planning. And the last two is just that kind of questioning and your students making, your children, making their flashcards and you questioning on them. And that last one there, your child teaching you and talking to you about what they're learning and how they're learning and what they're remembering is really, really, really helpful. You do not have to be a subject expert. Please do talk to your child about revision and use some of the techniques that we've covered on the videos here. The last thing is a question that parents and carers often ask and students ask, which is how long should I spend revising? And I'm always a bit reluctant to say because it really differs between children. There's no such thing as, students don't have the same brain, they don't have the same capacity to work for the same period of time. But if you looked online and you typed in how long should I revise for, something that would come up would be the Pomodoro technique, which is that students should revise for 25 minutes and then take a designated 5-minute break in which they definitely don't do any work and they have a proper relax and they don't think about work. Now, some students would say, oh, I can do that 4 times in a row, as long as I have those 5-minute breaks, then I have a longer break. Some students will say, do you know what, I'm going to set aside an hour, that's 25 minutes, 5-minute break, another 25, and then another 5-minute break, and that's all I can manage. I don't think it really matters as long as there is some planning for a break in the revision. What we know is that the brain can't just go on endlessly, so students who sit there and cram for 3 or 4 hours at a time, after a certain period of time, it's not really going to be going in anymore. So planning breaks deliberately into whatever revision schedule you put together with your child is going to be important. And again, they're going to need your help with that in terms of planning the time, and then, like I said earlier, support from parents and carers in, dropping the snack or a drink up during those windows, and what have you. So that would be something to have a look at online. There's lots of different variations if you type in how long should I revise for. There are lots of different theories out there. You probably found this video by coming to the revision tips and resources section on our website. All of the videos that I've talked about, if you haven't paused and watched them already, are listed there, video 1 to 6. And the document that I also referenced from the teacher toolkit, which I think is is written very well for teachers and parents and carers, is also saved in that zone. Hopefully that has been of some use to you in understanding what we've been talking students through in school and why we've been doing that so early. Like I said, even if you just take one of those techniques and use it at home, or if it triggers a conversation about revision and study at home, then that's really going to be of benefit to your child, and the sooner they do that, the better. If you have any questions, please do be in touch with your child's year team leader or the Raising Standards leader for year 11. We'll be more than happy to talk through anything else we can do to support you and to support your children in their preparation for their year 11 exams. Thanks so much for your time in listening and watching this presentation.